at the second.
Okay.
The second wine is made in our main estate in Sicily, named Feudi del Pisciotto. Feudi del Pisciotto is the company founded from Mr. Panerai in 2001 and located in Niscemi. Niscemi is it's a small village between Piazza Armerina and Caltagirone in the southeast of the island. And inside of the estate is still alive and perfectly untouched the beautiful Palmento, that is the ancient cellar, 100% in concrete. Is a very, very beautiful and perfectly untouched. And the peculiarity of this estate is that the top line is part of a collection called the Fashion Designer Collection, where all the greatest Italian fashion designers have created the labels for us, like the wine we are going to taste quickly: Versace, Valentino, Missoni, Giambattista Valli, Carolina Marengo, Alberta Ferretti, and others. That they are designing the label for us without any royalties, but from our side we use the compensation of these royalties to help the renovation of museums and the artworks of Sicilian culture. So the wine we are tasting today of Feudi del Pisciotto is Versace 2018 and 100% Nero d'Avola, vinified in stainless steel and aged in a French oak barrel, a small French oak barrel, 50% new and 50% second time for about 18 months. Just one important information, that for all wines we are tasting today are wines en primeur. So all vintages are not available in the market yet. So we are presenting the vintage that will be presented in the market starting from June and for the second part of the year. So please, Antonio, thanks.
Well, I think it's 100% Nero d'Avola. I know there's nothing else added, right?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. So I mean, I think Nero d'Avola is this wonderful variety that gives you an explosion of fruit flavor, like berry flavor, red, purple fruit, floral notes like rose petal and lavender. But what I'm really interested to learn about this wine is, it seems like the style of these wines is much fresher than it used to be at the beginning. And is that this vintage, or is it just sort of the evolution of your?
It's the vintage. It's the vintage.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a very perfumey floral wine, but it still has really nice fruit. And I think it's a style that I think is very contemporary, because if you think about these wines, I think Nero d'Avola in Sicily has been penalized, I think, a bit in the past by being very rich, very concentrated. And I think that those wines are delicious, but I think that they present challenges for pairing with food, especially if you think about global cuisine. And since there's such a tendency to focus on food that is more about purity of ingredients, and I mean, if you think about like where cooking has gone in the last 20 years, it used to be that we wanted rich sauces and rich preparations and more. And today everybody wants less. I mean, still high quality, but more transparency in food. And therefore, that's why I think, a lot of the wines that I like, but I think when I taste this wine, there's a certain, I mean, you could imagine drinking this wine with fish, you could imagine drinking it with just about anything. And I think that this is a very important change in the way that all of us think about wine. And so I'm quite happy to see this wine being so floral and so delicate, but still having that Nero d'Avola center of fruit. Because I think about all the people that I see on the screen, and I know that we're talking to a global audience. I think this is a kind of wine that could have a really big global appeal. Whereas maybe some of the wines that you made in the beginning were really powerful, and that is pleasing on its own, but it's not always the easiest wine to reach for when you want to have food. So I personally enjoy this style quite a bit.
Grazie. And just to confirm what you said, my mission since the beginning of our experience in Sicily was to try to have a wonderful compromise, from the body that is easily come out alone, but also to try to save the freshness, working hardly in the vineyard, trying to save a good acidity, because as you know, the acidity is really, really important to keep the freshness in the entire tasting of the wine.
So, I mean, I also think that a lot of times people ask me sort of like, what are you looking for in a wine? And I think that there's a lot of ways you can approach a tasting. We know that we don't really taste these things like flowers and berries. They're suggestions. We taste acidity. We taste the four basic things, but basically everything else is an aroma and an impression. It's like when you look at a painting like a Picasso, there's half a piano. It's not ever the whole piano, or half a vase of flowers. So what you're seeing in a wine is a suggestion of something. And those suggestions, we know they're very personal because we all have grown up with different flavors in the foods, what our parents made, what our grandparents made when we were kids. We know that what we really taste in wine is smell, and that's very personal. And so I could say it's red berries, but somebody else might say, no, it's purple berries or blueberries, So I don't focus a lot on the taste in the wine, but more on the structure of wine. And the reason for that is if I describe the flavors in a wine, all of the people on this call might have a different idea of what that is. But if I say this is a very aromatic mid-weight wine with good fruit depth and a very long finish, probably 9 out of 10 people will be like, yeah, okay, I see that. And so therefore, I think it's more relevant to speak about wines structurally in terms of the flavors, because also the flavors and the aromas, they will change in a wine over time, with bottle age. Yeah. Whereas the structural elements in a wine, they stay the same most of the time. So what I think is interesting about this wine is I can still taste this wine, even though I tasted it like a minute or two ago. It's very persistent. And this is always considered a signature of an important wine. And so regardless of whether I find the flavors to be more berries, or somebody else could say it's, blood orange or whatever, those are very personal things. But the persistence of the wine, I think if you really stop and pay attention, and now that I've been talking for probably too long, but you can still taste the wine.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. You can still taste the wine. And I think that that's really important, because that, it's not always easy to evaluate young wines either, because they're just been bottled and maybe they've just been shipped, and you wonder, am I really understanding this wine and whatever. Some vintages are austere, but I think one of the keys to tasting that was always taught to me was to focus on the persistence of the wine, its finish. And this wine, for all of the time that I've been talking, I can still taste it. And so that makes me very hopeful.